So I'm going to say welcome to the Power Hour on Employee Voice, the Age of Listening organisation, and this Power Hour is partnered and powered by Harkn. We last week or 2 weeks ago did the top 25 and top 50 inspiring workplaces in the UK and Ireland and Europe, handing out these trophies. Brand new trophies, 75 of those went out in the room. And next week, we'll be announcing our first ever inspiring workplaces across Asia, Latin America, the Middle East and Africa. For those that joined at that time, on the 18th, we'll be in Chicago, back to Chicago, one of our favorite places in North America, to do the top 100 inspiring workplaces. Really looking forward to that ceremony. Inspiring Leaders is now open for entries, as well as the Work Tech Awards, both with an early bird deadline at the end of this month. So check out the website. Our podcast Inspire Club will be coming back imminently. And our next event around the corner is our annual summer series, with a slight change this year. Rather than doing a talk a day for 2 weeks, we're doing 2 talks a day for 1 week, condensing it down and giving you as much value as we can mid to late July. So please register for what is a fantastic lineup of storytellers there. So yeah, lots going on. A great time of the year, although it is very, very dark and dreary in England today. Hopefully it's sunnier wherever you're tuning in from around the world. But back to today's Power Hour on Employee Voice, powered by Harkn. I'm actually really looking forward to this one. I always look forward to all of them, but these 2 storytellers have, I think, on the face of it, quite contrasting views on this, which should make for a great conversation at the end of it. And I always love difference of opinion because I think that's where change happens. So to our first storyteller, David Bellamy, founder and CEO of Harkn. With 25 years of experience in management consulting, leadership, advice, and strategy, David has a deep understanding of the human aspects of work and the challenges leaders face in creating a positive environment. He is the founder and CEO of Harkn, as I said, the employee listening tool that's on a mission to empower every voice, shape businesses through listening, foster workplaces where everyone thrives. Also, top 25 work tech vendor winner as well, and on past awards gone by. The platform's live sentiment analysis and an honest digital dialogue capabilities help organisations to hear more of what matters from their people. After all, no strategy, change initiative or acquisition can succeed without a motivated and engaged workforce. David is also a thoroughly nice chap, as we say in England, and really does know his stuff. So without further ado, please welcome to the Power Hour, David Bellamy.
Hi, Matt. Thank you very much for that. I'm terrific. Thank you. Thank you for that very warm and kind introduction. Good to be back. Now I'm going to quickly, there we go, get into presentation mode here. We are doing a little bit of swivel chair here, so forgive us. I'm going to be, if you hear me say next slide, it's because we've got dual drivers. As Matt said, I'm David Bellamy, founder and CEO of Harkn. I'm delighted to be back at another Power Hour. Thanks to Matt and the team at Inspiring Workplaces for giving us the platform to share our perspectives on listening. And I guess without further ado, welcome to the Age of the Listening Organization. So Amy, next slide, please. First, a quick quote from Satya Nadella of Microsoft. The future belongs to those who learn, listen, and adapt. The listening organization doesn't only adapt to change, it anticipates it by paying close attention to the subtle, often unspoken signals from within and around it. Now, we all know Microsoft, but maybe not everybody understands the transformation that Satya has brought about there. And they're famous for being a learning organization. And as this quote makes clear, Satya fully understands that being a learning organization relies on first becoming a listening organization. Next. And these two are going to go really quickly, aiming on to the next one. But before we talk about the listening organization, a quick provocation, or maybe not so quick, actually. So why do we listen to employees? Why do organizations listen? Well, look, there's a lot of text on here, and please, you by all means, read it if you can see it. But I'm going to read through it because it sort of sets the scene for some stuff I want to talk about in a minute. But so we listen to employees because it's about enhancing employee engagement. So listening to employees fosters a sense of inclusion and value, which in turn boosts engagement. And engaged employees, more productive, motivated, committed, etc. And a Gallup study found that companies with high employee engagement experienced 21% higher profitability and 17% higher productivity. That should have been profitability and productivity, if in case I said the same word twice. Now, full transparency, this is not, this is Google search stuff, right? So if you search why should we listen and what's the importance of listening, this is the sort of stuff that comes up, and I'm using it deliberately because it's sort of setting the scene. It's about improving employee well-being. So when employees feel heard, it positively impacts their mental and emotional well-being, and this reduces stress and burnout, leading to a healthier and more resilient workforce. And proactively addressing well-being can prevent crises and reduce absenteeism, ultimately saving costs associated with healthcare and lost productivity. So we listen because it's about driving innovation, and employees are often closest to day-to-day operations and can provide invaluable insights and ideas for improvement. Encouraging open dialogue and feedback leads to innovative solutions that drive business growth. Companies that listen to their employees are 4.6 times more likely to be innovative and agile. Retaining talent is crucial in competitive job markets. Employees who feel their voices are heard are also more likely to stay with a company. And we know that high turnover rates are costly and disruptive, enhancing organizational performance. Listening to employees helps identify and address issues before they escalate, provides real-time insights into the organizational climate, allowing for timely and effective interventions. And according to HBR, companies with a listening culture have a 72% higher employee retention rates and 70% better team performance. Building a culture of trust and belonging. The trust is the foundation of any successful organization. And when employees feel that their voices count and their opinions are valued, it builds trust and fosters a positive organizational culture. And trust translates into high cooperation, collaboration, and a willingness to go the extra mile, something that we know all companies love from their employees. And finally on this list, and there could have been many other things, of course, but informing strategic decisions. Employee feedback provides critical data that can inform strategic decision-making. Understanding the on-the-ground realities and sentiment can guide leadership in making more informed and effective decisions that align with the workforce's needs and aspirations. So listening at work is not just about hearing what people have got to say, and it's certainly not just about that sort of active listening that we like to describe in leaders. Actually, it's a critical component of building healthy, productive, and engaged workplaces. So we go on to the next one, Amy. So how effective are current listening approaches when it comes to supporting those reasons, right? So first, how do most organizations listen? And the most commonly used approach for organizations to listen to their staff is still the employee engagement survey or the employee opinion survey, depending on the way your organization describes it. And in most cases, this is still annual. And why is that? Well, probably because the industry has done a really good job at convincing people that the only way you could possibly listen at scale is through a big survey, or indeed several smaller ones, as we're seeing from the sort of the emerging and rapidly growing pulse survey market. But if you sort of agree with the sentiment of the reasons that we listen that I've shared a moment ago, and that's partly why I read them out in the way I did, then the one thing you're almost likely, or you're almost certain to deduce, is that periodic surveys alone are a lousy approach to deliver those outcomes. And the next bit, I want to spend a bit of time telling you why I think that. We could go on, Amy. Now you have a PDF. You've got, my little reveal, which is sort of animation of crossing out each one of these things as we go through, has been ruined by the PDF, which shows you that I'm saying we're rubbish at all these things, but let me tell you why, right? So let's start with the employee engagement piece. And in fact, an error on my part here, just a version control thing. does the way, so the headline should not say, why do we listen to employees? It should say, does the way we currently listen deliver these benefits, right? So enhancing employee engagement. Just a reminder, so listening to employees fosters that sense of inclusion and value, which turns, in turn, boosts engagement. And we heard about, the higher profitability and productivity. But the reality here is, sadly, very few people feel heard in surveys. And we all know this feeling, right? We respond to countless questions at a moment in time, usually in the form of Likert scales, and then we wait. Right? And companies then have to determine what's most important. They'll do this normally by shortlisting the questions that perform least well, the squeakiest wheels. And let's be honest, there'll probably be a degree of working out which one's going to be the easiest to address. But we're also not getting to talk about the things that we consider most important. We're having questions determined by our employer or indeed the survey provider. And so we're not getting to share the things that we want to talk about. And that leaves us feeling unheard. And I'm going to talk a bit more about reasons and manifestations of this feeling unheard in the workplace. And we also shouldn't, at this point, when we talk about enhancing employee engagement, we shouldn't ignore the fact that this has been the dominant approach, using employee engagement or opinion surveys to solicit feedback and views of employees. This has been the dominant approach for 20 plus years, into the 90s, aren't we? And engagement isn't getting any better. So something must be wrong. So does it help employee engagement? No. Improving employee well-being. So a quick reminder of what we said there. When employees feel heard, it positively impacts their mental and emotional well-being. This reduces stress and burnout, leading to a healthier, more resilient workforce. Proactively addressing well-being can prevent crises and reduce absenteeism. So we already know that employees don't feel heard. And we know that despite surveys being used for decades, stress and burnout are getting worse across the board. The reality is that when it comes to well-being, there isn't a survey that exists that can proactively support well-being issues as they manifest in individuals in the workplace. At very best, they can probably indicate systemic issues in the workplace, but certainly not how the environment impacts individuals, and most importantly, where support is needed right now. You have to be, you'd have to have a very targeted survey delivered at a very specific moment in time to catch somebody. And that's, when it comes to improving employee well-being, that this is a big cross. Driving innovation. And a reminder of what we said, employees are often closest to the day-to-day operations and can provide invaluable insights and areas for improvement. And encouraging open dialogue and feedback can lead to innovative solutions that drive business growth. Right, so employees are absolutely the closest to the day-to-day operations. But when did a survey ever ask you about the specific technologies, processes, or customer interactions that you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis? Right, and so we're missing a huge chunk of information about the things that drive what's happening for us daily at work. And the key thing in that previous sentence as well is the role of open dialogue and its role in sense making, exploring our collective understanding of what's happening, sharing our views, experiences, and allowing the process to take our frustrations, which is often, let's be honest, if we're sharing feedback about our day-to-day experiences, frustrations can be one of the things that we share. They're not coming fully formed ideas, and this is what we should improve. They're coming as this is what's bloody difficult today, and this collective sense making that happens through dialogue, open dialogue, helps us to elaborate those into something that's much more actionable. So driving innovation. Now retaining, that sound effect was, I didn't do that when I was practicing this earlier on, so that's a new thing. Retaining talent. Retaining top talent, crucial in a competitive job market. And the important bit here, employees who feel their voices are heard are more likely to stay with the company. So we know the cost and the implications of high turnover, but feeling heard in this instance is about feeling valued. And I think the really important thing when it comes to the organizational approach to listening through surveys is this, right? How does listening once in a while convey that your opinions, your experiences, your voice is valued. It simply can't. There is no good relationship in our lives where we're only interested in the other person's views, opinions, experiences once or twice a year. I mean, Wendy from our team, came up with a brilliant analogy where you describe that employee survey process in the form of having that dialogue with your significant other at home. I value our relationship, and I really want to hear what you feel about things. So here are 50 carefully curated questions, or perhaps, given Mike Klein is up next, we should talk about the 12 carefully curated questions. But referring to your latest article, Mike, that's of course not today's talk. But the point is, they don't work in that way. It's not a good signifier of value in a relationship at all to be only interested in what people have got to say when we provoke the question. Enhancing organizational performance. So listening to employee helps identify and address issues before they escalate, providing real-time insights into organizational climate. And again, I don't need to continue reading that for everybody to know that that's not what surveys do. Timeliness counts here, right? Identifying and addressing issues before they escalate is virtually impossible with periodic surveys. What you stumble upon at a moment in time, a bit like the well-being thing, is one thing, but you're going to miss countless other things. The nuance of day-to-day life is lost when we're only asking questions once in a while. So are we improving performance by listening every now and again? No, we're absolutely not. So continuous building a culture of trust and belonging. Trust is the foundation of any successful organization, and when employees feel their voices count and their opinions are valued, it builds trust and fosters a positive organizational culture. Trust is key, absolutely key. Surveys don't build trust, they break trust. And this is, and I should say, of course, the mechanism surveys in themselves, they have a place in a listening toolkit, but they can't be the centerpiece. And this is largely because we know that most people feel that nothing will change as a result of them taking part in the survey. And part of that is about the fact that only some things change, from that list of many things that it could be. But moreover, I think, that again, the cycle that we're in with survey response, wait, organization decides what it does and then makes some change. And most organizations try to do things with it. But when change does occur, it's not recognized as being about the feedback that I gave. Because unless, as I said earlier, unless my response happens to coincide with enough other people's views that makes it onto the list of the squeakiest wheels, then I'm not really feeling heard at all. And because there's a significant delay between survey and action, the world's moved on and the context has changed, and we're all thinking about other things right now. Few people feel heard. Trust is not enhanced. And one other thing to say on this subject of trust and whether they are helping build a culture of trust or belonging, you can't go near TikTok or Reels, which tells you a little bit about how I spend too much of my spare time, without seeing yet another meme about surveys not being trustworthy or anonymous, not being safe to speak up, and that really should be telling us something. And finally, informing strategic decisions. Employee feedback provides critical data that can inform strategic decision making. Understanding on the ground realities and sentiment can guide leadership in making more informed and effective decisions that align with the workforce's needs and aspirations. So completely agree with that sentence, but the crucial issue here for me is understanding on the ground realities and sentiment, which I'm sorry, it is hardly ever truly reflected in survey questions or responses. And I'm sure everybody would agree with that. We don't get to understand day-to-day life through surveys. So as a primary listening tool, the survey is at best box ticking, at worst sort of a confirmation bias informing vanity exercise, right? And that's pretty strong, but it skirts over nuance and the realities of life inside a modern organization, and we think that really needs to change. Amy, if we could go on to the next, and just a quick quote. So the most basic of all human needs is to understand and be understood, and the best way to understand people is to listen to them. So let's talk about the listening organization, and I promise I am nearly done now because it was 16 minutes in and I was told I had 20. The world has changed. So, what is the listening organization like? The world has changed beyond recognition. We're still using the tools we were using before. We're using the tools from the 90s, and the world has changed dramatically since 2020 in particular. Not only has it changed, it's continuing to change. I think most people would agree that we are in a change, sort of a change pattern now that is faster and more demanding than ever before. And I know everybody says that, but most of the thinkers that I place a lot of value in would be into that camp now, saying that things are getting faster and more complex and more uncertain. And all of that puts more pressure on companies and the people within them. And so this sort of idea of a listening organization becomes increasingly important. And I just want to share some things about what a listening organization feels like. So, the listening organization is one in which employee views are considered crucial to understanding what's happening on the ground, that collective and dynamic sense-making activity. And that is absolutely about listening all the time, not just sometimes. We can't be looking for moments of truth. We can't be looking for key moments in employees' life cycles. We can't be looking for, cherry-picked moments to listen to people. We have to listen all the time and understand what on earth is going on. And we need to do that in a way that is going to, get people engaged in understanding where we are right now, what's the context and what needs to move. In listening organizations, the value of genuinely engaging with employee experiences, ideas, and feedback is absolutely understood. Organization sees this as foundational to organizational learning and growth. And if you want to become, as we said right at the beginning, if you want to become a learning organization like Microsoft, then you must first become a listening organization. Feedback mechanisms are dynamic, inclusive, and responsive. They're live and continuous sources of insight that foster continuous dialogue between stakeholders of your business at all levels and drive continuous improvement cycles. No more you said, we did, but an ongoing conversation where insight drives iterative change. Every voice is proactively sought. We're looking to hear, understand, value, and respect what everybody in our organization can bring. And really important here is, this means accepting that psychological safety isn't something you simply declare in your organization. It's safe to speak up. We want to hear everybody's opinion. We have to accept that. It's not as simple as that. Feedback mechanisms need to accommodate everybody's need for provision of safety. You need to give us, if you want to hear my views, then we have to accept that employees need certain conditions like anonymity to provide their views honestly and safely. And the last point here is that leadership understands that its role is to create the conditions in which people can thrive and where good sense-making, decision-making, and action-taking can occur across the organization. This is not about leaders doing all the sense-making and all the decision-making and the people on the front line doing the action-taking that results. We have to get better at iterating this stuff as a collective. And that really, again, starts with listening. And I want to just finish with one final quote from Brené Brown. The age of the listening organization is upon us. Sorry, Amy, if I didn't say click on, please click on. And it's not just about gathering data or feedback. It's about understanding the story behind the data. It's about empathy, understanding, and most importantly, taking action based upon what you've heard. It's about creating a culture where every voice matters and every voice contributes to the shape of the future. And I think that's something I hope you would have heard I've covered today. I've done a fair bit of bashing of the way that we listen. And I know that there are broader systems in place in organizations, but I've centered on the one that most organizations use primarily to listen. And yeah, that's it. So that's 20 minutes and 30 seconds. So I'm okay, I think. And that's it. I shall stop.
You're fantastic. Thank you so much, David. Lots to unpack there, which I hopefully will do once we hear from our second storyteller. So see you very soon.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you. On to our second storyteller and their views on this topic. Mike Klein, founder of #WeLeadComms and principal of Changing the Terms. For more than 2 decades, Mike has been a consultant, blogger, and industry agitator. with a strong focus on internal and social communication. Love agitators. A former US political consultant, Mike has lived and worked in 7 countries, integrating communication strategy with the use of qualitative research in corporate, NGO, and government settings. Mike is an MBA graduate of the London Business School, a fellow of both the IOIC and the Centre for Strategic Communication Excellence, and is the founder of, as I said, We Lead Comms, which you should definitely go check out on LinkedIn. It celebrates courage, initiative, and leadership across the communication profession and really shines a spotlight on those great professionals pushing it on a daily basis. To his talk, it's on the 2-question survey. In this talk, Mike will discuss the 2-question survey, a simple quantitative approach for servicing major insights from the employees that can be quantified, tracked, and acted upon in any organisation. Welcome to the stream, Mike. Hey, Mike, how you doing? Oh, can't hear you, I'm afraid. We have got a sound issue. So Mike's muted. So I'm not. Are we able to unmute Mike, please, if we can?
Does this?
There we go. We have you. Hello, sir.
Hello, sir. Nice to see you again, Matt.
Nice to see you too. I'm going to let you do your thing, and we will speak to you very soon.
All right. Before I share my screen here, I just wanted to just kind of link this to David's talk, but also very clearly demonstrate that I'm taking a rather distinctive approach to what David's talking about. My view isn't about creating a holistically listening organization in one go or trying to listen to every employee in one go. A lot of organizations which don't do a particularly good job of listening, that are stuck in the employee engagement, or even worse, the Q12 employee engagement pattern of asking arbitrary questions according to Likert scales. What I'm talking about is fairly radically different. It's really about improving the quality and the power of what gets listened to, and then increasing the appetite of the organization for broader and deeper insights that you could then create a case for going to the organization more broadly. So what I'm talking about is something called the 2-question survey, and it's literally a 2-question survey. You can ask additional questions, but these are 2 questions that will give significant power with relatively low bandwidth from an organizational impact perspective, in terms of the amount of trouble that you have to do to get this information. So Matt has gone through most of the bits of my background. I think the key thing is that I'm actually based in Iceland, so I have a somewhat mid-Atlantic way of looking at things. I'm American, but I've mainly worked in Europe over the last 25 years of my career. And as David mentioned, as Matt mentioned, my previous roles were in political consulting and survey research. And why that's important is that one of the things that we learn, particularly in political consulting, is that there's so much more power in the qualitative research, because it doesn't simply provide numbers, it also provides words that put power behind those numbers. And what I want to talk about today is a very different set of reasons why organizations want to listen. I see 3 core things organizations listening to, or attempting to listen to, when they make the effort to do so. They either want to confirm that what they're doing is actually having an impact, that people know what they need to know, and that they're aware of what they need to be aware of. And there's kind of something underneath that. To a certain extent, I see this particularly when communications teams do research. What they're really looking to do is to validate the approach, the strategy that they're taking, to demonstrate that it's working. Less common, and I think this kind of covers the range of things that David were talking about in terms of the benefits that organizations were seeking. What I would say is simply that some organizations seek to discover when they're listening, By seeking to discover, they seek to find out about those things that they haven't been trying to confirm or they haven't been looking to validate, but which actually could be those things that are getting in the way of them being well-performing organizations or to achieving their specific objectives. And so how can organizations listen effectively? Again, David's alluded to this with the survey approach. There's two basic ways to ask questions in an organization. You either ask lots of questions with a limited range of answers. So the 50 question or 100 question employee engagement survey baked down to a single 1 to 10 scale. That's the most common approach. A much less common approach, and the approach that I'm going to talk about further, is about asking a very small number of questions which can deliver an unlimited range of answers. And so this is getting into the space of open dialogue. I think this is getting into the space of open dialogue that David was talking about. But at the very least, when you ask a small number of questions that are highly general, you can get a wide variety of answers to when you ask those questions. So now I'm going to introduce the 2-question survey. And the 2-question survey has 2 simple questions. What are the 3 biggest priorities facing the organization? And what are the 3 most important things that you're working on? Again, what are the 3 biggest priorities facing the organization? And what are the 3 most important things that you're working on? It's not an accident that I asked for 3 answers to each question, because one of the things about the 2-question survey is that it actually works powerfully even if you're forced to use a very small number of initial respondents. Sometimes you don't get permission to do a second survey, particularly if you're doing some big employee engagement survey that your HR department wants to protect the response rate for. Sometimes you can't go to the whole organization to get the answers to these questions. Sometimes you have to start with 20 people. Maybe if you're lucky, you'll be able to do 200. I recommend starting no more than 400 people, not because it's not important to try to listen to everybody, but in terms of being familiar with the approach and in terms of being able to illustrate and demonstrate the impact of what people are saying, it pays to start with a more measured group of people. And also, what you'll discover in asking these 2 very general questions are some very specific things. At a minimum, you'll get the communication gaps. When you ask people what are the top 3 priorities facing the organization, and they may have been published already in vision statements, value statements, mission statements, or in um, 12 different slides with 3 different priorities each at the last management conference. I mean, seriously, I worked for a large multinational packaging company, and they were acting as if 17 strategic priorities were of equal importance. If I was able to do this at that company, I would have been able to demonstrate clearly that most people didn't know what those 17 priorities are. And even more importantly, they wouldn't be able to treat all of those priorities as equal. There would be some alignment gaps. Some people would see some things as more important than others, and some people would see some of the things which aren't on the list as being of equal or greater importance. Another thing that you discover when you ask questions like this is the choice of language and tone that people bring to the table. For example, nearly every organization runs a transformation program, or at least run one, I'd say in the last 3 to 5 years. And most of the time, these transformation programs have a name. So, say, for instance, your company is running the Delphi Transformation Program. When you ask what are the top 3 priorities going on in your organization, you will get some number of people in the organization talking about the transformation program. Some of those people will say the Delphi transformation program. Some of those people will say Delphi. And some of those people will say the damn cost cutting program, or choose your Anglo-Saxon swear word to replace damn with, to just show the level of intensity of emotion or deprecation of the approach. One other thing that you'll see, and particularly this is something that we'll go to as we look at the mechanics of how to work with this, are company priorities and individual priorities and the extent to which people see them as important and serious. So with company priorities, what you're looking at are the acceptance of official priorities, the extent to which people buy and accept the level of importance that you're ascribing to those priorities, the prevalence of unofficial priorities. So these are things like hygiene factors or cultural barriers or other things that people have to contend with in order to pursue the official priorities. You'll also get the rank order of the priorities, the language that's used, and if you are able to do a big enough sample, you can find what I like to call rogue nations, which are unaligned parts of the organization, people who are dancing to a somewhat different set of priorities than the top priorities on the organization's official list. Then you look at personal priorities, the extent to which people are fulfilling organizational priorities, the extent to which they're embracing or rejecting those priorities, and the relative importance of specific activities. So, fortunately, even if you're asking hundreds of people the answers to these questions, it's fairly easy to categorize them. And I mean, what you need to do is you collect the answers, you look at a set of categories, you categorize the answers, and then you count the answers that you get. So, in working with my masterclass students, I have a masterclass on measurement, and I've asked this question of about 100 different students, coming from different communication functions around the world. And they tend to identify 8 categories: communication, people and culture, leadership, sustainability, financial structure and processes, macroeconomics, and performance. These are the categories that always keep showing up whenever people answer these questions. And in most organizations, some of these are clearly more official than others. Sustainability is generally an official category in almost all organizations. Financial, non-financial performance, structure and processes. These are the things that businesses like to say that they're working on. People and culture can be really important in organizations where talent is a differentiator. But things like communication, leadership, and macroeconomics, these are things that are either things that an organization should be handling properly or that they have no control of. And I would say those would be considered unofficial priorities. So what you do is when you've conducted the research, then you list out, you categorize it, then you list out the quotes, and then you count the responses. So out of, say, 20 responses that I've gotten from, say, one cohort of students, we had a certain number of responses in each category. And so that was then able to be baked down into some numbers. And what we saw clearly was that most of the responses were coming in around softer issues. And 3 of them, macroeconomics, communication, and leadership, are things which wouldn't be considered official priorities. So if you look at the aggregate here, about 90% was on softer issues, and only 60%, and 60% were on things that the organization basically should either have under control or had no control over. This is not to say that this is the case for any organization. I did this with an international energy company, and the vast majority of responses were aligned with the issues that were really clearly seen as key corporate issues. Indeed, 100% of the responses were on things that they considered key issues. But the key thing is, once you've gotten those numbers, the key thing that people will listen to is not just the numbers, but the words behind those numbers. So when you're talking about leadership and people say crisis scenario became the way of living, that's something that you could present to your leaders, and that's something they're likely to listen to, because you can't simply deny that if this is something that's showing up in the organization. Or under people and culture, a culture of yes. Or even under communication, no practical measurement. These are illustrative examples that take those numbers and bring them to life. So what does this approach give us? It gives us numbers and quotes. Numbers and quotes can build a story. These stories can be worth listening to, and they can be developed over time. It's important when you're doing something like the 2-question survey, not to just simply treat it as a one-off. I mean, you can get value out of treating it as a one-off. You can get value out of treating it as a one-off and asking 20 people if you get some decent quotes behind it. But the key thing is to ask this periodically, whether it's every week, every month, every quarter, and you may want to ask different groups of people. You may want to do a larger sample so you can segment the groups of people. But the key thing is this story develops over time. It's not just simply that people are concerned about people and culture. It's what people are saying and whether there's any movement based upon the response to what people have been told and are listening to. The other thing is that they can be explored in more detail, comparing new starters with old starters or longtime employees, comparing people in different functions, different genders, different ethnic groups, different geographies. The ability to look at this stuff in a more targeted way can make these stories come to life and more worthy to listen to in a way that gives us unlimited insights. Unlimited insights are what give us unlimited scope for impact. Thank you.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you very much, Mike. And welcome back, David. Lots to unpack there. Definitely not a host of not question time news night, so please give me a couple of seconds to form my thoughts. Rather than contrasting opinions, I feel like they were complementary in some respects. And I suppose I kind of want to ask you both a direct question. I know probably know David's answer, but do you agree, I suppose, with the Brené Brown sentiment that this is actually the age of the listening organization, Mike?
Whether it's the age of the listening organization, I mean, Brené Brown is a bit further ahead than most organizations are. And I think David and I are as well. I think this is the age where the listening organization gets defined. And there will be companies that embrace it, some of the companies that follow, and there will be some companies that resist all the way. But at least we have the conversation about what a listening organization is and what the future of that could look like.
Anything to add, David?
No, well, no. I mean, Mike's right. I mean, I think the thing that has really grabbed us is the rapid shift. I was talking to a FTSE 30 company a few weeks ago, and they were slightly concerned that they'd missed the boat on this whole listening thing. I thought that was really interesting. We do these big surveys and we suddenly realize that they're not right, and when they're not the right thing, and we need to do something different, but we might be a bit late. But Mike's right, so there's a big movement here. There's lots of stuff happening now, and people are realizing that we need, people expect different things at work, but the terms are being defined. We have a set of views. If you were part of this team, you'd hear us saying we'll set the terms, but that's that's the basis on which organizations should listen. Absolutely is one of the things we aspire to be setting the conditions for, if that makes sense. What will this market look like is something Harkn would like to set. We've got a bit of work to do yet.
One thing I really liked about yours, Mike, was a bit of, I suppose, being a business owner. It kind of really resonated with me in the fact that you're getting your people to really direct business priorities and actually seeing where, like you say, where things are landing, where there's a misalignment, and actually whether the population of the organization is actually focused on the areas that you want them to be focused upon. So I almost felt macro micro kind of an element really there. And I suppose that's why I was thinking about both your talks almost complemented one another, where David, like every voice matters, and it seemed like you're engaging and motivating a workforce around areas of the business and making them feel like they belong to the organization. Whereas David and Mike, it felt like you were coming from the other side of it, trying to confirm elements from a leadership point of view. And that's how I was hearing it, really.
Yeah. Well, let me respond first on that, if I might, because Michael probably have his own views. The first thing, one of the things I'd half expected, Mike, with the 2-question survey, and it's amazing, and you didn't do this, and that was what I liked about what you presented there. We often get into the kind of tell us the 3 things that you'd like to see better, or tell us 3 things that you love about this place. And they're often organizations trying to get people to do the work for them. is very hard, as I mentioned in my own talk. Actually, what most people do when they come to, if I want to give some feedback about something, I'm often going to express that raw and I haven't worked out what the answer is. I would have told you the answer by now if I'd known that. What I've got is a set of problems that I'm facing every day. And Mike, what you did really well, and your approach does really nicely, I think, is what are the three priorities and what are the three things what are your three things you're working on right now? Three most important things. The bit where I would differ is it's still centered in organizations thinking. It's still about what the organization wants to know. And so, I get listening to the way you present that. I could see lots of value coming out of that approach. The bit I still feel that we're not getting to grips with inside organizations is leadership is not hearing what life is like on the ground floor, right? They're not hearing the things that are causing people to have the sorts of issues that they are for reasons that, again, I alluded to in my presentation. Nobody ever asks how long it takes to fire up your laptop in the morning, and or how many security updates that the IT team have decided to put in when you need to be on that call at 9 o'clock and at 5:02 your system's still doing a rebuild, right? We don't get to understand the grit in the shoe that causes the sorts of stress in organizations that ultimately is the drip, 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 drip that causes people to get stressed and burned out. It is not traumatic events. It is an aggregate of minor, crap happening all the time. Sorry, Mike.
You ask these questions, you get a lot of that stuff. When you ask people, what are the top three things you're working on right now? The number of people who say survey questions and trying to get my computer to start, that surfaces. Does that give you, is that the majority? No. But what I tend to like to do when I'm analyzing this stuff is, in addition to the major categories, I like to focus on the stuff that's really top, and I like to focus on the things that, which are maybe getting small or just maybe one or two mentions, that are clearly hygiene factors that are built. Those are bandits on the radar screen that could become big issues if not dealt with. So, you get plenty of grit in the shoe when you ask these questions. And the fact that people would say these are important indicates how gritty those shoes are.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
But one of the things I wrote down was confirmation bias as well. Like listening to this, and you both alluded to it in one way or another, but the mindset of leadership has to. There's no point doing this if you're not going to be receptive to what you hear, and hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, and that's one thing I wrote down, because I think sometimes people can look to the stats to say, oh, we're going in the right direction, but actually ignoring a heap of other information that gets given to them that might be telling them to do something totally different. So leadership mindset's everything.
Well, there's confirmation. I mean, if we want to talk about status quo employee engagement surveys, there's two kinds of bias that really render them less than useless. First is the confirmation bias. You're asking for the answers that you want to hear. But second, when you put it on a scale of 1 to 10, and there's even the slightest error of psychological unsafety, people who want to give a 3 will give a 7 because they can't honestly give it a 10. They want to show that there's some gap with reality, but they also don't want to get shot. I like to say a 7 is a polite 3. But then you've got organizations who are bragging about having 70% employee engagement and using that as an excuse not to change things.
Yeah.
So,
Mike, look, you will not be surprised to hear that I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think, I can't tell you, Matt, the number of people that we still speak to who tell us that they did their anonymous employee survey. And these are not internal sort of spreadsheet things. These are surveys, right? And then HR knocked on my door or turned up at my desk, right? I got a visit or a call or a request to attend a meeting, right? And this is like Mike Ashley and in Sports Direct when he was fingerprinting the red, amber, green buttons. How was your day today? And if you hit the red button, it's getting bloody fingerprinted and you get called in. There are countless examples, but I'll just come back to the leadership mindset thing for a moment, if we can. I think there's a lot more to this than simply the face value. I mean, I talked about confirmation bias. But why is that happening, right? one of the things that we've created a sort of hero leadership culture. And I sort of meant this idea. We expect the leaders to be able to process all of the information, and we expect them to then set the vision that we're all going to pursue. We've made heroes out of these people, and the reality is that we then can't unpick that, right? And so what's happening is that this employee feedback and the reality not being the one I'm creating, because I'm not hearing this stuff, right? We've created conditions where information is not making its way from the ground floor to the top without being completely distorted. And then suddenly everybody's nervous about if the truth gets out. And so, leaders are looking at the world and saying that the conditions that we've created in this organization, I want them to be as good as they can be, right? Now, I'm not doing the work necessarily to make them as good as they should be, but I want them to be as good as they can be. And then anything that tells me they're not right becomes an attack on me. It feels like it's deeply attached to me and in myself. And I think there's a problem we've got to get over. And so this is why we're still talking about courageous leaders using products like Harkn, or, taking a different approach to this stuff. We shouldn't be talking about courageous leaders. We should be talking about leaders or leadership, right? Just people who understand how leadership functions and what their job is, should be listening in order to learn, in order to improve, right? And however you do that. But the sad thing is we are stuck with a position where the mindset for many leaders is still protect the image.
It's really interesting that you say that, because this is the conversation that I have not only about the 2-question approach, but about one of my other passions, which is identifying internal influence and unofficial leadership flows. And the reality is that organizations have a lot invested in the belief that their priorities are what the organization's working on, or the belief that the org chart is how the organization actually works. And a research tool that exposes this as invalid is a threat to that that construct. Now, the reality is, if you're not for courageous business leader, if you're a smart business leader or a responsible business leader, then at a certain level, you owe it to yourself to find out what's actually going on. But a lot of people who are in these positions are too busy protecting their status to really allow for any honest investigation.
Yeah. And it's balancing, isn't it? The disruption versus the stability. And they're trying to juggle that all the time. And I think, it is evident, isn't it, that if you took any senior executive and you asked them about the situation in the post office as an example, about the fact that information was stovepiped, there was no cross-organizational dialogue, there was no collective sense making, there was no way for information to move freely upwards in the organization, as far as we can tell, right? Everybody can see that and say that's crazy, right? But that would have been solved very quickly if that organization had a better mechanism or a better sort of listening sort of framework, right? And yet they don't see it in their own organization because they don't have the crisis.
Yeah. Also just bad people, but we won't go into the post office rabbit hole. So just bad people.
Yeah,
and they do exist within organizations. I suppose this might be an altruistic, easy way of looking at things, but what we were talking about just then, wouldn't companies aligning to their purpose help alleviate that, so the leadership and everybody else are focused on a set of values and a purpose? We see the rise of the B Corp company. Would that not be somewhat a way to alleviate that toxic leadership or that mindset?
Well, I mean, there's definitely toxicity in a lot of organizations, but I think, we also have to remember that organizations exist to do certain things, whether it's to fulfill a purpose or to produce results. And being able to identify the blockages between the organization's intent and the organization's reality is something that, with relatively limited effort and extremely limited investment in the grand scheme of things, you can be able to do. I mean, where I'm coming from with the 2-question survey is I'm an internal communication consultant. And one of the things that I want to do is demonstrate the value of internal communication and the interventions that I'm associated with. So I do the 2-question survey. We get a picture of what's happening. We address the inconsistencies and the misalignments. We measure it again, and we can demonstrate the value of the interventions that arose because of the survey. That demonstrates the value of the survey. It demonstrates the value of the specific interventions, and to a certain extent, it demonstrates the value of communication. So I'm not saying that this tool is not self-serving in its intent. It should be self-serving in the intent of moving the organization forward. But it's not necessarily about creating a more holistically wonderful organization for the sake of that alone. We are in the business, and if we can do things that demonstrate the value of our interventions to business, then we'll probably get more slack to do the more holistic things that will help bring the organization more holistically forward.
So coming to the end of the hour, I'm going to have one question for both of you, and it's originating from David's talk right at the beginning. I think a lot what we try and do is help people. This content, these conversations, to help people to build arguments or business cases to take it back into their own organisations and to get help. So I'll go to David first and finish with you, Mike, and your view. A real quick answer. Your first slide was why do we listen? And there are a number of areas that you went over, David, from well-being to attention to performance, creating a culture of trust and belonging. Which is the number one driver at the moment that you're seeing organisations prioritise to start their listening, to bring employee voice into the organisation? What's that when you're having these conversations with other businesses? What's the most common one you're seeing at the moment?
I think we have to start with the well-being question. The lack of the absence of any meaningful insight about how day-to-day life is affecting the individual seems to be probably the leading start point. We think it's just the opener, but yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. And Mike?
Well, I mean, from my case, it's really a business leader having a problem or being stuck and seeing what would, trying to figure out what would unstick. I mean, well-being, as important as it is, it's also fairly intangible. Most business leaders are looking for immediate gratification with the fixing of tangible problems. And so there's room for both approaches, absolutely. But in my case, it's more around, what can we do to move the organization forward in quick and measurable ways?
I mean, that comment there could be a whole other hour we could talk about, I think, intangible. So,
Matt, can I have one quick thing? Because I just want to on the intangible bit.
One quick
and it is where Mike and I completely agree. Harkn is also a 2-question survey, right? How do you feel and what's going on for you right now, right? That's it, data and stories. But that's how you make well-being tangible. So it isn't an intangible thing. You can show it, we can track it, we can predict it, and we can get ahead of it, right? So
I stand corrected.
And also the tangible is the output when people are unwell. We have stats coming out of that, out of everywhere based upon people, not being well, struggling. So, like I say, that's a whole other hour conversation. So, look, I really, really appreciate both your viewpoints, the insight and ideas that you put forward. That's got me thinking. I'm sure it's got everybody else thinking too. So, I would just really like to recommend that everybody listening, whether it be live or on demand, you go seek out Mike and David. Have you got anything to add before we wrap this up, guys?
Just a terrific session. Thank you very much, Mike. Brilliant contribution and content as well. So thank you. Thanks, Matt, as always.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you, Matt, for putting this all together.
Yeah.
Pleasure. Thank you for coming. So thank you very much, everybody. Another Power Hour in the bag for 2024. I think we have 3 more to come. September, October, and November. On 3 different topics, of course. Please keep an eye out for the Inspiring Workplaces announcements over the coming 2 weeks. The last one will be Australia in July. Inspiring Leaders is live, WorkTech is live. Lots of different stuff coming your way, and a really big announcement from us on Thursday, actually. So please keep an eye out for that in your inboxes. So without further ado, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day and see you soon. Okay, bye-bye.